All right, what's going on? We're going to go over the trade review today for NQ, kind of look at overall the markets that we were looking at. We'll go over the positions that we actually took on the stream. And then, as you guys know, if you guys were on the stream, as we were closing out the stream, it was like 10:30. We had been on session for about 2 hours at that point. Usually I clock out around 11:15 a.m. and the setup was actually brewing uh, to potentially go higher, right? To present us for what we were waiting on at that moment. So I'll kind of go over that area. I'll also go over what's called the play of the day and a play that I believe could have worked out potentially better um, if I wasn't already in a position to go short. Like if I wasn't already or to go to long. I was already trying to long a position, and then the shorts actually ended up playing out, which was fine. So let's take a look here what we got. We'll also look at the end of this. We'll look at gold, right? Gold and silver. And then some of you guys have messaged me and said, hey, I want to, do you ever look at gold, silver? I do look at gold and silver and obviously crypto. But the main focus we'll focus on is our futures market direction and then what we anticipate going into tomorrow. Okay. So I'm going to give it just like 2 minutes. It's like 35, and then I'll go ahead and do the full breakdown. Just wanted to see what all I had here really quick. I was like, why is it saying data is delayed? Oh, market's closed then. Okay. Okay, cool. So from the breakdown that we had this morning, I do want to just kind of see what we were looking for at first. I'll go back to the Telegram group. If you haven't joined the free Telegram, definitely join the free Telegram. It's in the description, so all you have to do is just go click the link. Um, and yeah, so what we were looking for was this March 12th. Yeah, we were looking for a long position. I was personally around like 10:40, 10:45. So we'll go over that. Until then, there really wasn't anything that I had personally seen that was um, gonna be really worth it. Now, one thing that I intended to do was to look for a specific area too long. So really quick, we'll start from the top down. We talked about the 4 hour. This is YM on the far left, ES in the middle, NQ here on the far right. We talked about seeing a move down, right? Like we talked about seeing prices move down back into the new week opening gap, and to see prices, back below 24,500 and possibly 24,400 going into Friday. And so now that we've actually filled a good amount of this gap, about 50% of that gap, so like from here to here, there is a chance that shorts could start to cover, but we also are in an area where, like I said, we could be bearish, right? The dailies look really, really, detrimental here. They're like, I mean, they're falling over to the area, so let's kind of look at it like this. So we could be coming under this low as well, right? And so like by looking at that, it's not looking too promising on the buy side, right? And so I'll bring over just NQ here, 15 and 5, so we can just kind of go over what we were looking at today. So today, what I was seeing is you see the New York Open right here. Obviously, this is the 15 and 5 minute candle. So that first 15 minutes was a bearish candle. So this candle here on the left, as you can see, this is the bearish candle. It runs up into that supply area, 24,820, and fails to go higher, right? So what I was looking at on that 5 minute was the structure. So we had already come and made a new low. So like this was a scoop low, right? And then price comes into that 5 minute fair value gap, right? Like right in here, and rejects and fails to go higher. Now that's where I was gonna say, I think I could have found a pretty good position inside that 5 minute fair value gap, okay? Because essentially we wanted to get to here, right? We wanted to get to the low of the day. And because I had missed that move in that situation, I was just going to say, I just told myself, if I'm not going to take that fair value gap short in this area here at the 835, then I'm gonna wait for price to deliver, right, where the buy limits will be sitting over here under the low of day, and then wait for maybe short covering to find a bounce play to where I can at least secure at least a 1 to 3 R to 1 to 5 R. All right. Now, looking at this, like I said, and looking at, you know, a couple other individuals and traders just around the space, I really noticed that those 5-minute fair value gaps really do work, especially when you have that overnight liquidity target. Just like as if we were looking for the price to do the same thing on the buy side, right? And we're usually targeting that overnight trader. Okay, so this is where the money was sitting. Okay. Now, one thing I need to do probably tomorrow is when we come in before pre-New York is understand like this was our scoop low, this was our scoop high, and then we broke lower, right? So we ended up breaking lower here and then making that fair value gap area in here. So like to really dive into that area, we'll look at like a 5 and a 1 minute. And I'll show you kind of how we could have possibly framed up a little bit better R. Now, me personally, I'm still hesitant, I guess you could say, when it comes to 5-minute fair value gaps. But when structure is printing that way and you're trading to opposing liquidity, which is the low of day, it's the trade to take. Okay. Now, for me, I will say what I was looking for after that New York opened was a buy side position, right? So I had looked at this as like, okay, cool. They faked out the buyers here and ended up running their stops at 24.5 or 750. And a lot of times, either sell side or buy side, what I'm looking for personally is going to be a draw on liquidity, right? And so the first position I ended up taking looked like this, right? We ended up coming down, we drew on liquidity, and then we were starting to make our way back up. We were under New York open, and price closed one sign of strength, and then started to show me the order block candle, and then being under New York open to then possibly see price run back up through these highs was kind of like what I was anticipating to see, right? So these highs right here, I was anticipating us to go back from this position here and then run back up. Now, the reason why I was wanting to see that as well was because we had come into an area where, you know, I thought maybe we were going to hold the low of day, and I was already willing to play under low of day if we get the capitulation through the area and then can cover the position. Okay. And so when you're looking at this, how I was looking at it is I was like, okay, cool. I want to make sure I'm under New York, and I want to make sure I'm inside the entry candle. Okay. And so being under New York would have put you like right here. Oops. Would have put your position like this. It would look like this on 5 and 1. All right, and we were looking for about a 1 to 3. Now, as you can see, depending on where you would have entered, right, like how we like to usually enter and be in alignment with that 5 minute, say you're a little bit higher on that position, like it started expanding here, then that means you wouldn't have delivered that 1 to 3, and that would have been a losing trade, right? So one thing I will say about those opening range trades is if you don't feel as confident in that trade in your direction, then feel free, if prices moved in your favor, at least a 1 to 1, that you could possibly just go risk off, right? Especially if you're taking it in the first 5 minutes of the New York Open. A lot of the times those are going to be fake out trades, okay? And so that by taking that trade, right, in which it's just a part of it, taking risk is how we do it, right? I believe I went break even on this trade because of where I took it from, because I took mine like a little bit lower. I took it right in here on that right side, and I was able to hit that 1 to 3, and then I covered the position, okay? Now, by doing that, what that did was that took me out of the 5 minute fair value gap play, okay? So when you go back and you look at this, right, we're going to mark up the fair value gap, right? Fair value gap, when I say that, for anyone that's traded with me for a while, that also means inefficiencies or imbalances, okay? So this is that area we're talking about. Now, as you can see, when you're thinking about fractalization of the charts, I probably, come back and look at this when I go watch some more of the recording on the 15.5. I probably come back and look at this and tell myself, this was an obvious play, right? Because you've got the push down on the 15, so 8 to 8.15, you got the lower low, and then you have 8.15 to 8.30, another push down, and then this was the New York Open candle. That New York Open candle rallies up. Not only does it fill the fair value gap, right, which is a beautiful play, but it comes right into the 15-minute supply, right? So if you're framing up positions on 15.5 and then waiting for 1 minute, 1 minute signals, right? This would have been a beautiful play, all right? So if you mark it up here, looking for a 1 to 3 to the downside here, this would have been the play of the day. And then also, if you have your 1 to 3 marked, right, you want to see what that 1 to 5 would look like, right? And then also like the liquidity target of the day, right, was a little bit lower, right? So getting to that low of day, right? So say you took the shorts here, price starts to fall in your favor, you get nothing but signs of weakness down, right? Then getting all the way down here, then you're pretty much going to be in a really, really good trade. So that's the one thing I could say I could have done better, even though it was able to still squeeze out a small win for the day, was that I could have, worked a little bit better on structure and then playing to the opposing liquidity that we were looking for. Okay. And I knew that area was somewhere I wanted when it comes to, like I said, the higher time frame. So I'm going to bring this one over too. All right, for the higher time frame bias, because what we're looking at specifically is going to be, the range, right? This is the low of the week. These are the highs of the week. And I told myself today, I said, if we had already made, right, we had already sold off, came down, right, done this, and then done this, and we failed to close back where that previous day low was, so back inside of yesterday's IB, by seeing that alone let me know that we should have been looking for those shorts down to the demand candle, which would have been here, okay? But because I was wanting to see that buy position off that area, that's pretty much what, stopped me from my perspective from seeing that 15.5 short, okay? And so beautiful shorts, I think, inversion shorts, whatever you want to call them, and balance fair value gap shorts to the downside with proper risk. I mean, that would have been a pretty easy trade, right? By seeing high, lower low, fair value gap fill, okay? So that's something I can get better at, is when prices, trending to the downside, waiting for that 5-minute fair value gap area, and then studying that area on 1 minute to start to play the turn, okay? So I think the best way to play that would have been, essentially, you're looking at the fair value gap, you're seeing it start to fail, and then you're playing the 5-minute area, which would have been 40 to 45, right? That's the capitulation candle that shifts delivery, right? So you actually start to get pushes lower. I would say you would want to be somewhere in here attempting to play that. Now, if you were looking at this fair value gap and you knew it was going to fail, then that open of that 5-minute candle could be your entry, right? Like, so this area here could be your entry, and then you could be framing up that 5-minute area to get down, right, just to this area here, which would have been a banger, okay? So that's kind of, yo, what's good, man? But I can see the chat too, so if you guys have anything or any areas that you guys got in, just let me know and we can mark them up as well. Like I said, we'll look at the trades that I ended up taking today, the New York trades we took on stream together, the play of the day, which I thought was what we just went over, which was the 5-minute fair value gap sell to the downside of low of day. And then I'll look at gold and silver to finish the call, okay? So yeah, that was pretty much the play of the day, I believe. And like I said, the only reason I think I was stuck on that was because of seeing this type of candle on the 1 minute and wanting to see that price buy back up, okay? So the other positions that I ended up taking today, I dropped a few in the Telegram. One of the positions was closer to the end of the stream. So we were looking at like 1040 going into, it was like 1039, right? So the end of the stream was like right here, it was like 1015, 1030 was this 5-minute candle. Then we have 1020 to 1025, then we have 1025 to 1030, 1030 to 1035. Now, what I was looking for at this time and how price was presenting itself was I was looking for price to correct, right? Because where we had come down to, we were looking at higher time frame area, we were inside of demand area, but it's also like in the middle of the range, which is like a trap candle type of area. So what I was anticipating is once we got the sweep of this area, I was anticipating buy limits to fill under this area, if that makes sense, okay, from the higher time frame perspective. And so what we ended up seeing here around that time was, because I didn't see anything in here. Did I see anything that I liked in here? I was wanting to, before I go to the 1040 area, I was starting to look at this area right at 9. And I do believe, let me just check the chat here really quick. I thought we took one other one at 9. Yeah, we did take one other one here at 9 on the stream. So the other one we took before the 1040, right, was this position here. So we had price capitulate through those lows, right? We had the 5 minute 8:55 to 9. Now, if you've been looking at price as well, price has been responding really well on all the assets at around 9 a.m. And so same thing here. We've seen the 5 minute candle. We usually wait for that 5 minute sign of strength, but because of how we knew the short covering would be very quick, I was looking for another position to push back up. Now, like I said, sometimes you can be in the wrong direction, right, and still be able to produce a 1 to 3, 1 to 5 R, right? But you want to get on the right side of the market and be with the trend, okay? And so what I was looking for in this position here at 9 a.m. was we had that engulfing candle 8:59 to 9, NCE type of entry. So NCE just stands for next candle entry. And so I was looking for an entry right here off that NCE type of area, right? And even if you took it late, you're just wanting to focus on getting your location of your trade inside the 5 minute demand, okay? Because like a lot of times, if you can frame up that trade, it's gonna work out pretty well for you, right? And so how I was looking at this was, if we can, as soon as we had the NCE, I think I took it a little bit higher, like 663s, right? And I was just looking for that 1 to 3, 1 to 5 to deliver. Now, when I took this trade, I was anticipating that shorts from the overnight were going to cover and we were going to push back up to point of interest, right? Back into that New York Open, back into that New York IB area, right? Initial balance of New York's price. And so we failed to close in that area. So when I'm saying like the area that I believe that price is going to continue to buy, what I'm saying is I wanted to see my buy come up in here, and I wanted to see prices closing above 24,750 so that we could eventually make our way higher if we were going to make our way higher. Okay. And so this one was this is a good trade for an example as well though, and you guys can go back and look at the live recording when we actually took the trade. But when you're taking a trade like this, you want to go ahead and have your preset partial, right? So it would have looked like this essentially on a replay mode, right? I come into the trade, I have my 4 contracts that I'm looking to take. So whatever volume you have, right, you follow the same system with whatever you take. So I came in, I wanted to buy that position here, right? Stop loss would have went 20 handles, right? Because that's what I like to risk on my setups. All right, so 20 handles on this one. And then what you want to do, right, because you're in a buy position, you want to already have your limit set to hit your 1.5, right? Now, if you don't want to do that, here's another thing for the streams. If you guys are actually taking these trades with us, okay, is a 1 to 3 risk reward is a really, really good trade. Okay, so if you take a trade with us, right, like on the stream, and you have max volume on, okay, so I'm going to show this example, and then I'll show the example of how we ended up actually playing it, okay? But this example is just for if you're just looking to hit a 1 to 3 while you're on the stream with us, okay? To do that, all you're looking for is price to move 60 handles, okay? A lot of the times, right, $482 is pretty crazy, okay? Now, and that's across the counts. So it's like, to think about it, right? If you're really just looking to get on and get off the charts, a lot of the times while we're on the stream, we'll hit a 1 to 3 fairly quickly, okay? Like literally it'll happen almost every time we take a trade. So for example, let's say you took that trade right there, right? You have your stop set, you know what your predetermined risk is. Price obviously goes in our favor fairly quickly, right? And then price delivers the area. Bam, cool. You're 1 to 3, you're done, okay? Because even if you ran that same system with only 2 contracts, right? Like, so if you're just like getting used to this and trying to figure it out, right? Even if you only ran that same system with 2 contracts, that's still going to be a really, really good day on the charts. Okay, so something like this, risking $80 for about 243, right? That's a really good day. Okay, so same situation, obviously, it's just going to respond and hit the area. Now, how we personally like to play it, okay, like how I like to play it is going to be just like this. Now remember, you can see the 5-minute area, so you can see what we're looking at on small time frames too. But in this situation here, how I like to play this is I like to add my 4 contracts, right? So my max volume for me for this type of setup, 4 contracts. Stop loss would be here. All right, same area. And then my 1 to 3, what I'm doing, right, is it's going to be a limit on the way up, right? So it's gonna be a sell limit because you want them to sell 2 of these positions at a specific area. And so you're just selling, all you're essentially doing is selling 50% of your volume, right? And so what you're doing is dragging that up to here, right to that 1 to 3 zone. So you don't have to think about it, because once this price delivers, what you want to do on the remainder of the trade is go break even. And I go over this all the time, over and over and over and over and over, okay? And so make sure you set it there so it's already ready. And so this is how we were able to take the trade, take a small win, and then not be, give back our win, if that makes sense, okay? Price obviously starts to go in our favor, right? Price is already set to sell half the volume right here at this candle. Now, from that moment exactly, right? Now, if you had 2 contracts and you did the same thing I just showed you, right? You could have 1 contract sitting there and then do the same act that I'm about to do here. I have my 2 contracts, 50% volume come off. All I'm going to do is trail this risk into a small profit, okay? Because now the only thing I really want to see happen is if price can go to the 1 to 5 zone, because I just secured 1.5, right? With half the volume. Half of 5, if it goes the full way, would be 2.5, which nets me about a 3.5 R day, which is going to keep you profitable, okay? And so when you look at this position, yes, there's going to be days where you want, price to go back to New York Open, or you want price to go back to 24,850, or you want price to go to a new high on day. But a lot of the times in these situations, you don't need that. You essentially just need a 1 to 3, 1 to 5 setup to present itself, okay? And so if you look at the rest of this trade, it comes a little bit short of the 1 to 5, okay? Now, you have 2 options you can do in these situations. Like, as this price is pushing, it's getting very close to your initial target, and you see a rejection here on this 1 minute supply, right? And essentially, this is what I wanted to talk about today. This is one of the biggest parts of the day, was understanding where the initial balance low was, right? The actual low of day. Once we took that low of day, right, that area becomes a reference of support resistance, of, can price reclaim, can price show signs of strength to go back above that area? Because if it cannot, then we're bearish, right? And so that's the area you want to be marking, right? The initial balance low. And so looking at this, right, we come up, what level did we respect perfectly? The initial balance low, right? We came back into that area, right? So I was like, oh, okay, cool. We're not gonna go any higher, right? We're like, we closed 1 candle there, and then we started to show like we couldn't break structure on a small time frame, and that's when I said, okay, we're getting ready to inversion down to the downside, because we've seen 1 sign of strength on that area, so 9 to 905. Then we had a 905 to 910 candle, right? That's the ICT fractal, timing, etc. And then that next candle, you push into that low, and we failed to go into that. I said this was the IB low. This was the New York original low, right? Initial bounce low. And once we couldn't close into that area, I had a feeling we were going to roll over and take another sell side move, okay? But like I said, if you had this move and you went break even on the trade, right, you would have been fine, right? Even with that initial balance low of New York being respected, and then price comes down, right, you would have been fine, all right? That's just how it is. It's how it works sometimes. And sometimes, like, if price will close higher on a 1 minute, I'll look and see if possibly I'll trail out this low. But in this situation, I'm just going to let it play out, all right? So price comes back, hits us for the break even. Fine, perfect. I'm not gonna complain about that one, okay? And then price rolls over to go lower. So we'll kind of go into the next setups that we were looking for after that. So price then rolls over. So this is the area that we were looking at. We ended up buying here. We ended up securing a 1.5. Price rolls over, okay? Now, the best trades to me, personally, that I like to trade when it comes to NQ, ES, or YM are going to be in the first 15 minutes of the hour or the last 15 minutes of the hour, okay? And so, okay, I'm trying to make sure I have this all set. So when you're looking at that price, right, and you're looking at the time windows down here at the bottom, your best times to see transitions and to see shifts in price delivery or like entry strategy, like entry models, are going to be in those times, okay? And so as we delivered that liquidity that we were talking about on the higher time frame H1 here, so that 24,577, I believe it was, once we delivered that area, again, I was thinking possibly we'll get that short covering. Now I knew that we could move down and fill more of the gap from the opening week, but I was anticipating that maybe we'll see that push up. And right, and sometimes you're just wrong on what you're not in the pocket. It's okay. All right. Okay, cool. So then we were looking at this area here. Let me go off the replay mode on this one. Where's the 1 minute? All right, take the replay mode off of this. And then we're gonna focus on that area. Okay. And so this area here rallies up fairly quickly, right? And this is the wrong timing, right? So this is why I don't like this one as much, because it was the wrong time. But I do believe we were able to secure a 1.3 or 1.5. No, excuse me, 1.3 R out of this. We were looking for a lot higher. Yes, this is exactly the one. This is exactly the one that we took. Okay, so when I came in to take this one here, I shouldn't have probably even taken it because the timing wasn't as great. 9:42. It wasn't at 45. It doesn't have to be specifically right at 45, right? Like it's gonna usually transition in those last 15. But I was looking for right side of this candle here, right? So you're looking at a 1 minute area. I was wanting to make sure that if I took a trade on the right side of this, right, on this right side, like this, that when I took that trade, that I was going to be inside, right, the 5 minute area, okay? And so this was choppy. This was a more forceful trade, right? It did have edge once I took it, but it was forceful. Now, here's what I did right, and here's what I did wrong on this situation, okay? What I did right was I did exactly the same thing we always do, right? I come in, I look for my 1 to 3, right? And I have that mapped out. Now, because we had already hit we looked for that 1 to 3 and it hit so fast on this one here, and we were able to secure 1.5. I already knew that if I took this trade here, I was going to secure another 1.5, which would have secured me a 3R on the day. Knowing that, okay, what I did not know was that we were going to fast push back into that 5 minute 24,700, which was what? Initial balance low. Okay. One thing I didn't anticipate on this setup right here that we're looking at was how fast we were going to push into that supply. Okay, because that was an easy 1 to 5. Okay, and so what I can say is like for me going into the end of this this week, and then probably like next week and stuff like that, is I'm not gonna look to, I'll look to, what I'm basically gonna say is I'm not gonna look to push too far, because I could have been done with the day right here, right? Take less trades, know how to take anything else. This would have been perfect, okay? But I was able to secure another 1.5, and then price comes back down and hits the break even. In this situation, how fast it delivered, we're praying for things like this, guys. Like we're literally waiting for situations like this to happen to where we can, just hit our 1.5 or 5R fairly quickly, okay? And so that's where I could have done better. I could have let this not turn into a break even after moving 100 points back into the initial balance and then failing to go higher, okay? Market's getting ready to open again here in about 15 seconds, so we should see something kind of happening. Maybe nothing too crazy, hopefully, but that's where I could have done better on that one. And then the next one that I ended up taking, still pretty good selection, I'd say today. It's just I could have done better in specific areas, you know what I mean? And so the other one was closer to, like I said, the end of the stream. I was kind of like damn, I wish I would have just taken that full 1.5. That would have been a super amazing day. And then we came into I'm trying to see if it's going to open crazy. I don't know why that's still delayed. I gotta check and make sure that I gotta check and make sure that my CME package is working, because that should be on. But okay, cool. So then as we come into the end of the stream, what time was that? 10:40, right? So 10:40 is like right in here. And so I was getting tired of waiting on this area. We delivered the liquidity, right? So that red line essentially, right? It's just gonna be that liquidity from the H1 area. And so I was just kind of like, damn, 11:15 is usually when I'm done. And so we seen this area start to form perfect, right? You got the 5 minute. I'm going to start deleting some of this other crap. Sorry, guys. We got the 5 minute shift in price delivery. So we had signs of strength, 1020 to 1025, right? And then in that area, we also had what? We had a 1 minute price mitigation, right? So like right in here, when we seen that sign of strength, we started seeing price build the right way. Now price takes off, and I'm just like, you know, because it starts to take off. But then it comes back right here at around 1040, and we were able to take another trade on the right side of this candle, because what we ended up seeing was 1037 price engulfs, and then there was another what, NCE type of entry to see a 1 to 3, 1 to 5. Okay, now every time, if you can tell, right, if I could just draw a box like this in red as a resistance, right, so we'll go from like this, just from right here over, right, this area is the initial balance low, right? So on all these trades, what I essentially was wanting to do is see, could we break through the initial balance low and start to close and reclaim back into the price. Okay, so I just want to remark it really quick. All right, so this was that area. Now 5 minute started to show us that what we wanted to see, and then price was starting to show mitigations to go higher. So what did we see right here? We seen the railroad candle, we seen the sign of strength, and then we seen an NCE type of entry. Right, that's a lovely setup that I like to take. All right, so price engulfs on the 1 minute, price comes in and tests, right, that candle, right, and you want to make sure your entry's inside that framework candle. And so I've seen an entry like this, 1 to 3, right, even if you got it a little lower, even if you got it a little higher, as long as you're getting your entry inside of that candle. Okay, and again, think about this, guys. Took a trade over here, which I think this one was way better than this one. Took a trade over here that delivered 1 to 3 so quickly, right? You're talking, you take the entry and then 2 minutes later you're at a 1 to 3. Guys, those are bangers, right? In a range market, even though it's on the sell side, okay, it's still a banger, but you just have to know what's going to be considered resistance on a day. 24,700 was my key level, because like I said, that was the initial bounce low. Now, another thing on this one that I could have done better is, and it still works out if this makes sense, right? I had still secured 1.5 on that first one. I was able to secure 1.5 here, and then I could have secured a full 5R fairly quickly here, and I could have done the same thing here, and I ended up securing another 1.5R because I ended up having it close itself at 1.3, right? It took itself out, and then it rallied to my 1.5 super fast. So some notes personally for myself is that if my 1.5 is delivered, right, like so my 5R is delivered in less than 5 minutes, I might be done for the day, guys. Like just being real, because you got to think, for me, that's 800 across each account. That's crazy, right? You don't really need much more than that. All right, so that was the situation on this first run up. This was the situation on this one. And then, right, I love to play moves, right, at the right time that fall fast back into demand zones, okay? So if you're looking at what I'm talking about here, this candle, right, for the 1105 to 1110, this is when I'm getting ready to be done trading. It capitulates, right back into the 20s or 4,600 level. But if you're looking at that from like the 1 minute time frame, right, entries and stuff like that, right, we're coming right back into that demand area. So if you would have taken a trade right here, secured your 1.5, went break even on the remainder, then you would have been available, right, at the right time, first 15 minutes of the hour, to take this trade here to then continue up. All right, and so that was probably, I think that was the thing for me, is that like the range is not like a bad thing. Like I think I was thinking before that like the range on certain things is bad, but it's really not. Okay. And so I'll kind of give an example here of how this trade looked and how the 1.3 looked and why it was so fast. All right. And so it looked like this. Right. We had this candle print, right, and it prints like this, bam, engulfing. Now when it engulfed, right, when I'm looking at a 5 minute, I'm thinking it respected the demand candle at the low, right? And so now I want to be on the right side of that to possibly play just right above 724s. Like I'm not even trying to really get back to New York Open in this situation, okay? And so to start framing it, you're like, okay, I want to frame up the open of the candle. I want to know where my 1 to 3 is, right? And so the next candle is this. Now when we do the entry, I'm gonna have to go back here really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the entries like right here so we have an idea, because I took the trade right there in the open of the candle. And so I got to go back one more just to have like the idea of show you what we looked at, okay? So we took the trade here. This was the area, but it wasn't like the exact time we took it, okay? And now we have the buy. We need a market. Okay. And so the stop loss was here, right? So our normal stop. And then we already know that we want to have a sell limit at, so 50% of our volume off at the 1.3. Okay. And then we let the price play out. Okay. So, okay, well, that was a stupid example of how to do it. We took the trade after that candle. So we'll just have to do it however they give it, the best price that they give us. Let's just do it from this price here, okay? But we took it inside that candle, so I just don't want to be contradictory to myself on that. Okay. All right, so market buy. We'll still market the same way though, okay? Because we're just focusing on being on the right side of the trade. Oh, snap, market buy. For stop loss. And then we'll do a limit. Sell 2 at R1 to 3. Okay, so essentially, like I said, you're just trying to make sure you're staying inside that special candle, okay? Now, when the price runs, right, obviously it destroys the 1 to 3, okay? And so at this point right here, when you're sitting at the 1 to 5 almost already, you can be very aggressive with trailing your risk, or you can just say, hey, if it gets to that level, you're out. Okay? And so the other thing I want you to do and focus on is, not only are we looking at the initial balance low as like a resistance level, but this was the last up candle on the way down, right? So this essentially is going to be your supply candle on the way up. So you're thinking, oh, okay, well, if we never get a break of structure higher than 24,750, we're not going higher, if that makes sense. Okay. And so same situation with this one as this trade that we took, right, in the 942s, was that this trade was already ready to go, right? This thing could have easily been 100-point trade, right? 5R trade, fairly quickly. Okay. But the reason why I always take that position and 50% it out is because psychologically it feels a lot better to be in a profit, okay, and to just be managing whatever the market's going to present. And so the price ends up just peaking up and delivering that area, okay? And so in a range bound market, you know what I would say for anyone, the newest person, someone who's been doing this for a while, maybe you're just looking for your 3R or 5R and that's it, right? That's the only position that you're looking for. Maybe the way you can manage this, if you already want to trade or if you've already put two 1.5s up in this situation and produced at least a 3R, is you're not going to cut at when it gets to your 60-point move, right? Your 1 to 3. What you're going to do is just only go break even. So for example, this is what I mean, okay? So essentially you're going to take the same trade, right, the same area, right, buy market 4, and then what you're going to do is just go ahead and set your TP for your 1 to 5, right? So your 5R trade, and that's it. You're not going to do anything other than that, right? Because if the market gives you about 100 handles, that's a pretty good trade no matter how you look at it, okay? And so price obviously goes, and we've seen how that worked, right? Now, what I would say is if you're gonna do it this way, right, and leave max volume on, when price gets through, do this one, my bad. When price gets through that 1 to 3 area, you're still gonna go break even, if that makes sense. So instead of you cutting the trade, essentially, you're not gonna do that part. What you're gonna do is just protect the trade and see if you're gonna get to your 1.5. Okay. And so, bam, price comes back down. That would have definitely scared people, right? And then it winks up and literally delivers the TP. Okay. And so those were the setups that I took. I think the inversion 5-minute fair value gap short to the downside just to attack overnight buyers would have been great. I thought this position was managed pretty well. I thought this position was more forced but managed well and definitely produced what we wanted. And I thought this position fit the criteria better with the NCE type of entry, and then also still securing, still producing the 1.5R. Okay. So yeah, that was, I believe, make sure I look at this again. That was the last trade that I ended up taking for the stream, and then we ended the stream like at 10:30, like right before, literally right before, because I thought we had missed the moves. I was like, whatever, damn. Ended the stream and then ended up taking that trade, and that's what I ended up finishing off with for the day. So pretty good day. I think there's definitely opportunities inside of a range bound market. You just have to really be locked in on what you're looking to see. Okay. And really lock in, guys, on those initial balance lows and highs, because those are going to be areas obviously where people have resting stops. Now, if you had any of these buys, we had partial out of all this pretty much at this point right here. So if you had any gold CFD situations, everything was partial out and break even at this point. So to see the fall off today, I mean, that's pretty much, in my eyes, it's just seeing profit taking from the 5,220s. Okay. Now, there's a couple things I'll look at this for the future to maybe play it a little better. But for me, I was pretty happy with what it produced. And then looking at the overall, right, once we delivered this area that we were talking about, now I'm starting to see more signs of low resistance lows, right, that they might want to run through. So buyer liquidity, right, that they might want to run through and come fill the fair value gap here at the 49.50s. To then price might reclaim, but until then, I'm gonna hold off and just kind of wait on Goldilocks. Okay, because this daily being where it's at inside a massive supply, so basically coming in here like this, shows me that we could definitely roll. Okay, and then looking at silver, it just looks very similar. Okay, and then last thing I'll kind of talk about here really quick is just, we've seen oil prices, shoot and take these highs, right? We've seen them run up and just, to the almost 120s, and we thought price was going to sell off, and now we're starting to see price reclaim and maybe fill some more of this wick. So I'm going to keep my eyes on that, because when there's things going on inside of crude oil, you're going to have responses as well on your futures market. Okay, so that's going to be it for me on the trade review for today when it comes to NQ. We will be back tomorrow for some more trading. But with that being said, I appreciate you guys watching. Unless you guys have any questions, then we'll leave it at that. So cool. Alrighty. And yo, what's good, Tay? I did see you in there, brother. So cool. We'll see what they end up giving us. Not gonna try to guess really anything for tomorrow, other than what are we gonna see here just really quickly while we're finishing out the call. I think we're gonna continue to make our way down. So you're looking at a 4 hour, 1 hour here, that we're gonna make our way down back into the market open. And then we're going to see if price is going to, if people start to sell this open and price falls fairly quickly, they'll have to cover at some point, and they're going to set limits under wicks and under old lows. And so what I anticipate is that they sell off this price overnight into the 4 hour demand, right? That we might see recovery going into New York before we roll over, if we're going to be bearish, if that makes sense. Okay, so tonight I'm just going to let it play out. Let's see if they get below this low here, right? And then see if they start to come into this fair value gap tomorrow, right? Going into New York session to then play that position. The other scenario is if they don't end up delivering that level, right? And this was the liquidity they wanted, or they wanted to go just tap below market, or just kind of fill this inefficiency here, then I can anticipate them to go higher from this type of area. But I'd like to see a deeper pullback into the 24,400s, 300s, before seeing the buy position. So again, I appreciate you guys watching, and then we will be back again live, I believe, tomorrow morning, depending on how it looks, right? So y'all have a good night. Talk to you later.